Welcome, everybody. If I may just quickly introduce myself, I'll be moderating this panel today. I'm retired Air Marshal Sammy Sampson. I'm the Executive Director of our IISS Middle East office based in Bahrain. If I can start just by a couple of words of scene setting. Clearly, the Ukraine war has increased the necessity for European and NATO members to close some critical military capability gaps. And then the choices that this presents, whether it's buying off the shelf from foreign suppliers or, as we've heard earlier, indigenous developments where possible. So hopefully this session will help bring some colour to some of the different strategies and some of the different plans and approaches that European countries are applying. We have a beautifully set panel, I would say. We have representatives from Central, Eastern Europe, the Nordic, Baltic area, and Eastern Atlantic, Ireland. 3 in the EU, 1 not. 3 NATO, 1 not. We have different sizes of populations, different topographies, complex land, sea and air borders, for all, and different levels of defence industrial, indigenous capacity and relationships. And one of the countries represented here with conscription. So we should be able to cover an awful lot of ground, and I'm hoping the panellists and speakers will do that very nicely for us. I will invite the panellists to present some opening remarks for 6 to 8 minutes. And then once they're all complete, I'll open the floor for questions. Hopefully everybody has seen how the system works. If you can raise your hand, it's the button to the right, and I'll ask you to provide your comment or your question, if I may. So if I may introduce each speaker individually and ask them in the order that I give to provide their opening remarks. First, it's Lieutenant General Theodor Inkikas, the Director of the General Directorate for Armaments in the Ministry of National Defence in Romania. General, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me first of all to thank the organizer for inviting me to such a distinguished and, in the same time, challenging meeting. It's an honor and the challenge, as I said. And also it's a challenge to be the first in the order of providing the speech. In light of evolving global security challenges and the necessity to ensure our national defense capabilities are robust and modern, we recognize the critical importance of effectively procuring military equipment that meets both our military requirements and the national security interests through a strategic and transparent procurement process that prioritizes the needs of our armed forces. Sorry, I'm reading, but I will speak freely about comments and questions. Military procurement is not merely a matter of purchasing equipment. It's about ensuring that our armed forces are prepared to defend our sovereignty, respond to crises, and fulfill our commitments to allies. The right equipment enhances our ability to deter aggression, conduct operations, and ultimately maintain peace. To do so, the procurement process starts with defining the operational needs or requirements and has to consider cost-effectiveness aspects, innovation and technology, sustainability and local industry, international partnerships, while as a governmental organization we are using public funds and we are speaking about public acquisitions, promoting transparency and accountability, and last but not least, continuous evaluation and improvement of the procurement-related process. We have to clearly integrate into the legal requirements of the European Union, which are defined in the Directive 81 from 2009, which clearly, in our opinion, has room to be improved. Understanding the specific needs of our military forces is crucial. This process involves the operational side of the house, as we are calling defense experts and military leaders, identifying the gaps and prioritizing the capabilities required for current and future missions, which in turn will in the end translate in the future equipment requirements. The assessment will also have to take into account technological advancements, troop readiness, and the changing nature of warfare to ensure our forces are equipped to respond a multiple diversity of threats as this illegal and barbaric aggression of Russia against Ukraine proved. The procurement process has to consider life cycle costs, including acquisition, maintenance, and logistic support. We must ensure that public funds we are entrusted with are spent wisely, balancing quality and affordability without compromising our military readiness, which is very important because, you know, the length of the process of the current, according to the legislation, acquisition process could affect in a kind the operational readiness that our troops need, that this is the main reproach the operational side of house is looking for us, is addressing to us. As modern warfare evolves, integrating cutting-edge technology becomes essential. For this reason, we seek to prioritize procurement of military equipment that provides technical superiority and interoperability with our allies. Supporting and involving the national defense industry as part of the procurement strategy not only boosts the economy, thus contributing to a more robust, reliable, and resilient national and European defense industry, but also ensures a reliable supply chain for maintenance. When procuring military equipment, we always look for opportunities to strengthen our local defense industrial base, fostering jobs and innovation at national level, while ensuring the integrity and security of our supply chains as a key pillar of our national security interests. However, I have to stress out that our first priority remains to procure the most effective equipment necessary for the forces in a timely manner. The national defense industry involvement comes on the second place. Collaborating with allies can enhance our procurement strategy through joint acquisition, shared research, and co-development technologies. I want to give you just an example. Is the 5.5 billion euro joint procurement of new-built PAC-2 GEM-T missiles for Patriot air defense system, in which Romania, together with Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain, tasked and NATO support agency to buy 1,000 missiles manufactured in Europe. We are committed to a transparent procurement process that engages stakeholders and informs the public about our purchasing decisions. This includes adherence to best practices in competitive bidding, contract management, and supplier accountability to ensure responsible use of national resources. The EU legislation in acquisition is promoting this transparency and clarity. The procurement landscape is dynamic, and we will continue to evaluate our process and policies to adapt to emerging challenges and opportunities. By encouraging feedback from our military personnel and industry partners, we aim to refine our approach and enhance the effectiveness of our procurement activities. Of course, there are challenges in Romania. The procurement law is under the civilian authority, and trying to modify becomes, in numerous cases, very challenging. Despite the importance of effective procurement, we, the ones fighting in the realm of public procurement, face several challenges, including bureaucratic inefficiencies, national and European acquisition limitations. I'm speaking about regulation, and of course, budget limitations. To the last, Romania has decided to allocate, since 2015, 2% of its GDP, and starting with 2023, 2.5%, out of which more than 20% goes towards procurement or endowment. Even so, the competition among armed forces services are posing an increased stress on the available budget and on the acquisition organization. I speak about the competition regarding the priorities of different services in the Romanian armed forces. Overcoming these obstacles requires a comprehensive process to facilitate coherent decision-making, increase transparency, and foster accountability. In conclusion, procuring military equipment that meets the national requirement is essential for maintaining a strong and capable military forces. by focusing on operational needs, ensuring cost effectiveness, embracing innovation, supporting local industry, and fostering international partnership, we seek to build a robust defense strategy that protects our nation today and the future. Acquiring the best equipment provides technological superiority, which helps us achieving deterrence, one of the main missions of any armed forces. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to take any question or comments.
Thank you, General. We'll wait until the others have spoken, and then we'll take questions as we can.
Very convenient for me.
Very convenient. I'm very struck by the fact that the word you mentioned most was public, and taking your population with you on these difficult journeys and difficult choices is something perhaps we can pick up in questions later. Across the panel and across the European landscape, we'll be going from as far east as we are to as far west to Ireland, and also to the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of percentage of GDP that is committed to defence, and understanding the difference in the national approaches to national requirements. I would ask Mr. Eamon Murtagh, the Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Defence in Ireland, to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. And although there are differences, there's also a lot of similarities in from our last speaker. So just to set the context, Ireland is a militarily neutral country, no defence industrial sector, geographically on the west of Europe. And really, in terms of the conversation about delivering on natural requirements, we've begun a journey of substantive reform in 2020 with the establishment of the Commission on the Defence Forces, which was looking at the appropriate capabilities, structures and staffing of our Defence Forces 2030 and beyond. And that was a decision by the government at that time to take a root and branch look at what our Defence Forces and our national requirements would be. That Commission report was published in February 2022 and coincided with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so it would have elicited an awful lot more public discussion and debate in the context of that invasion than it would have heretofore before in Ireland. So that public engagement piece and bringing the public with you on the journey of delivering on national requirements and the why of those national requirements is a really important theme, I think, in terms of what we're trying to do now. That report had 130 recommendations across a wide variety of issues, but three most relevant to the discussion today are the identification of key capability gaps that Ireland had to fix, the need to instigate a top-down capability development planning process that looked beyond just the short and medium term, but also more longer term and broader than just the equipment that was required, but the full spectrum of mil-feet training, maintenance, etc. And critically, to match the level of funding required to meet that capability, as well as the policy to support that. So I might talk a little at a macro level with respect to some of the learnings in terms of how we've gone about delivering on those national requirements in Ireland. I think the first key thing is government commitment and a commitment across the political system. So our government at the time of the Commission of the Defence Forces agreed to move to implement all the recommendations and substantially increase the level of funding for our Defence Forces out to 2028. And that report and the discussion internally within Ireland was fully behind that. So there's no real, there's no opposition to the direction of travel. There might be differences in how we get there, but there's a political agreement that we need to invest more in our Defence Forces. And that's very important in terms of to ensure continuity in delivering on national requirements beyond just government cycles of 4 or 5 years. And in Ireland today, the current government is going to dissolve, and a new vote is happening at the end of November. But we'd expect to see continuity in this area, which is really important in terms of delivery of national requirements. That approach in terms of top-down capability development is a change for Ireland in terms of looking beyond just the equipment that's required, but also with respect to training, maintenance. It's the full life cycle throughout the piece. And that's really important as we're to be able to sustain that capability beyond time. And then thirdly, it's the area of policy. When we published just this year our Defence Policy Review, which looked at the trade-offs and priorities that Ireland needs to have, given its geographical location and given the strategic risks that it faces. What are our priorities? And that prioritisation piece is very important in delivery of national requirements, because we cannot do everything, particularly a country of the size and scale of Ireland and the step up that one has to make with respect to capability. That prioritisation is key. The next piece is about how we get it done. And there's a full range of procurement activities that we need to look at. It's not just about running the national procurement competitions under EU law to access that capability, but it is also looking at the area of joint procurement with other governments in countries in Europe and beyond, and also government-to-government type procurements, which can help support the broader development of the capability rather than the focus just on the equipment. And I don't think it's a question of either or, it's all of those, because given the scale of the capability enhancements we wish to make, we have to look at all options with respect to that. We also have to look at the interoperability. We need to look at tried and tested solutions in Ireland, and we will be looking more at the off-the-shelf, because we can't afford to get this wrong. So we have a risk aversion really to major innovations with respect to that. Off-the-shelf, utilised by other countries, is much more beneficial for Ireland than something new or novel that the support network around potentially may not be there. I think it's also critical in terms of your capabilities is that you have your pipeline of capabilities and projects being developed, both on the short, medium and long term, and that you're focusing on those projects and capabilities that have most impact, but also that are deliverable. And that's to ensure that continued enhancement of capabilities continue over time. And probably most relevant to my department and our Defence Forces in Ireland is about building the capacity to deliver that capability. So there's going to be quite a number of procurement competitions or negotiations or legal agreements that have to be put in place, or technical requirements to define what our needs are. And one has to look at the capability within your own organisation and your own country to deliver on that. And that is a big challenge, particularly in Ireland, in an area of full employment currently, and a very buoyant industry where those sorts of skills are utilised. And government are going to find it difficult, I think, to compete with industry with respect to that. But it's also critical that you don't spread ourselves too thinly in terms of trying to manage or trying to progress capabilities across a whole swathe of areas. One needs to focus on where you can make most impact, particularly for a smaller country like Ireland. And then finally, I think it's really important to have what I'd call a virtuous circle of building credibility and confidence in terms of delivery of that capability. So we've put and trained this new process. We're investing more and more public money into the area. People need to see the payback that comes from that. Both the users of that capability in terms of the members of our Defence Forces, the general public can see where those investments have gone to, but also across government and the political system, so that they can continue the investment in the defence sector that's needed for the capabilities that we're going to need in the short, medium and long term. So there are my opening reflections on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's quite interesting what you were saying there about the long-term thinking informing, where you go with your capability and requirements, when often many other nations will buy equipments which have long lives, which shapes their longer-term thinking. So perhaps we can pick up on that a little later. And Next, we'll head north. So we've gone from east to west to north, and rest assured we will come back down south for the final discussion. It's Major General Henning Andre Fransen, who's head of the Department of Defence Policy and Long-Term Planning in the Ministry of Defence in Norway. General.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to take part in this fantastic summit. Congratulations to the IISS on doing this. And also thank you for the opportunity to be in this panel, sharing a few thoughts on the procurement issue. And I sit here as a defense planner. My job for the last 3 years has been to oversee the process with our long-term plan that was decided upon by Parliament in June this year. That process has been carried out against the backdrop of a very dire security situation with Russia's invasion in Ukraine and the consequences flowing from that. And I think it's fair to say that the Russian war and the war in Ukraine transcends all planning assumptions that we made for the last 25 years in Western Europe. So we really had to think through. And the realization of the government was that we really have to step up our defense efforts. So the result was a very ambitious plan. We moved beyond 2% of the 2% mark this year, and we are aiming for 3% sometime after 2032. It's a 12-year plan, a financial commitment for 12 years, and in 2036 the budget will have increased by 80% compared to the level of 2024. We will invest heavily in capabilities in all domains and all services. The most ambitious part of the plan is the fleet plan, encompassing new frigates, a new standard class of vessels for the Navy and the Coast Guard, extra submarines that are being developed and produced together with Germany, long-range maritime drones for surveillance in the Arctic. The Army will expand from 1 to 3 brigades, and we also increase the National Guard. We double the capacity of NASAMS batteries, and we introduce 2 long-range air defense systems with the capability to counter short-range ballistic missile. Like I said, this is a very ambitious plan, and nobody in the Norwegian Armed Forces have done this before. For the last 30 years, we have been downscaling, making the organization more effective, making room for modernizing parts of the organization, one part at a time. This is a broad build-up, and it will be challenging. And we have to realize that there is no recipe, there is no known program on how to do this. So we really have to think through how to deliver results on such a broad scope. I think one thing is developing a good plan. I think that's the baseline. However, we also have to realize that with the pace of technological change, a 12-year plan will have to be modified as we move ahead. So we have tried to build in some flexibility in the plan as we realize that we are in the midst of something that can develop towards a revolution in military affairs, revolution in warfare. A lot of the technologies on which we rely today were introduced 20, 30, 40 years ago. What we call or refer to as emerging technologies are in fact well-proven, battle-tested technologies. And I don't think we foresee where that will take us in 10, 20 years from now. And which is why long-term planning is difficult. And I think Michael Howard stated that long-term defense planning is not about being right. It's about not being too far off the mark. And that's words of comfort for a defense planner, I think. We have tried to build in some flexibility in the plan. We realized that we have to re-evaluate and rebalance the plan. There is a process for that every year to go through opportunities, the realism of the plan. We have put a lot of effort into R&D as a part of the plan because we think that R&D will be important to guide us in making the right capability choices as we move ahead. We have broadened the scope of research and development, trying to bridge the military classified R&D with what goes on of R&D efforts in the civilian sector. For that, we need infrastructure, and we need systems, and we need financial arrangements to underpin a program like that. We also were challenged as we worked with the plan on how to do this realistically and responsibly, as you also mentioned. So we had to sort of war game how much can we procure every year as we move ahead. And we have to differentiate our procurement systems and regulations. And we did that as an integral part of the plan, having long and fruitful discussions with the Ministry of Finance on how to do this. So that is something we did as a part of the plan. And finally, we have to look into the matter of the industrial base and the industry's the industry's capacity to deliver what we need. Norway has a defense industry, and last month, the government presented a roadmap towards increased industrial capacity, introducing financial arrangement and 47 steps towards increased industrial capability. And I think that's important. To close off, what to buy, when to buy it, whom to buy it from, and how much we should buy now, and what we should postpone for later, are the kind of challenges and the dilemmas that we face. I think we have come up with a good basis in the plan that was presented, but we have also communicated with Parliament that the plan will have to be re-evaluated as we move ahead, and I think transparency on that and sort of risk sharing between the government and Parliament on that issue has been very important. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, General, and particularly for bringing out the points at the end, but also through your points about understanding obsolescence as well as relevance, and potentially an extension of that is attrition in your thinking and your approach. So finally, can I move to Air Commodore Edward de Van der Schoren, Director of Plans at the Ministry of Defence in the Netherlands, and a fellow airman.
Thank you, Sammy, and thank you also for inviting me for this panel, and also thanks to the audience for being here and attending this discussion. And I'm glad I hear a lot of common things from the other speakers. So I think what we are going to do in the Netherlands is not that strange. But before I answer the question, what is the Netherlands doing, or what is the strategy and plans for a more effective and quicker procurement, I will give you a little bit insight on how I look at the problem. And I do that as a director of plans, and in our structure I'm between the National Capability Director and the National Armament Director. So I have to translate the capability plan into a capacity plan before I order anything to be bought. And I have 3 one-liners I like to mention, and then I will go into depth after that. And the first one is growing hurts. It hurts from inside your body, and it hurts outside your body. The second one, there is no single solution. There's no silver bullet for this problem. And the third one is long-term planning still matters. And let me start with the first one, growing hurts. You know it from being a little kid. When you have this growing spurt, it hurts. It really hurts. Not only in your body, but also with your brothers and sisters, because you need more room. You need your own bed. You need your own bicycle. And that is actually what's happening in our country as well with the Ministry of Defense. Because it hurts inside, because we need the people not only to fill the operational units, but also to be able to buy the equipment and to build the real estate and to design the architecture for IT system, etc., etc. And we are not the only company or government who is lacking personnel. It's also the industry, it's also society. Everybody is lacking personnel at this moment in the Netherlands. So it hurts. But it also hurts because of our procedures. Our procedures are from the time that we had a little bit money and we had to decide, as the other speakers as well, who is going to get the money. Is the Air Force, the Army, or the Navy? So we twist every euro 20 times before we buy something. And that is it's not a procedure you need now, because now you want to spend your money and now you want equipment to come in. So personnel and procedures is hurting. But we also have growing pain in industry. The industry needs to skill up, and that's difficult for them because they want long-term commitment from our side. You can't ask them to produce more, and then in 3 years you say, okay, thank you very much. Now we don't need anything anymore. And they have also the same personnel problems, but also getting money from investors. And maybe it sounds strange, but investing in weapon industry in the Netherlands is in the same corner as investing in tobacco and porn. And we have to change it. We have to change it. So we are talking with banks and pension funds to change that attitude. It is not wrong to invest in weapon industry because it is about your own safety and the safety of the society. But we also have growing pain in society. As I said, when you're growing as a young child, you want your own room and you want your own bicycle, etc. So we need room in the Netherlands as well. We need space. We need extra space for training environments. We need space for new infrastructure. We need space to make noise with our aircraft, and that is a problem. I don't know if you have ever seen a satellite picture from Europe at night. Then you see all the little lights where people live and industry is and work, and you see some dark spots where no one is. We don't have dark spots in the Netherlands. So asking for more space is a problem because other departments want more space for windmills, solar panels. We want more space for nuclear plants. We want power plants. We want more space for whatever, and we want more space as well. So we are competing in the Netherlands about who is getting the space. So to my second one-liner, there is no silver bullet. For us in the Netherlands, there's no standard strategy how we're going to solve this problem. And one of the reasons is because our three services, the Navy, Army, and Air Force, have a different primary ally and a different country where they purchase most of their equipment. When I look at the Navy, it's very national orientated. We have a good military shipbuilding capacity in the Netherlands. So historically, we buy our Navy ships in the Netherlands. And a few decades ago, we started a very close cooperation with Belgium. So when we buy ships, we do it together with Belgium. For example, we are now buying new anti-submarine warfare frigates. And that means that the Netherlands will buy the frigates for both Belgium and the Netherlands. The same for the mine hunters, which will be bought by Belgium for both the Netherlands and Belgium. And we do that in maintaining the ships as well as educating the personnel. So Navy is very national and Belgium orientated. And you know Belgium is south of the Netherlands. For the Army, it's different. They are more European orientated because of the close cooperation with Germany. And that cooperation, actually integration, goes very far. And I will give you one example. For the tank, the heavy infantry brigade, we have a Dutch platoon in a German battalion, which is part of a Dutch brigade, which is part of a German division. So far goes the integration for land. So when we think about buying equipment for the army, we automatically look at Germany, what they are doing. And happily, they look at us, what we are doing. So we have to buy the same gear. So that's a different orientation than our Navy. And for the Air Force, it's even worse. We look at the US, and it's not worse because it's the US, but it's even more different. We fly the F-35, the MQ-9, the Apache, the Chinook. So for the Air Force, the orientation is transatlantic, and especially the US. So a different solution must be found for a more effective procurement. And the last, what I said, is long-term planning still matters. Of course, we want to procure as soon as possible and as fast as possible, but we also have to look at the future. So investing in innovation is still needed. And when we look at the RT&I program, we need to evolve what is happening everywhere and the lessons learned we see. And as I said, the long term is also essential for industry. You can't ask them to buy equipment as soon as possible and then in 3 years say, okay, thank you very much, that was it. Because then they will never open a second or a third production line. So answering the question, what is the Netherlands doing? When I look at personnel, maybe it's not the subject of this summit, but for personnel we are looking, of course, at better salaries, better conditions for housing, for developing, for education, etc., etc. But we also look at another kind of reserve force. We have the traditional reserves, but we are looking more how we can make young people enthusiastic for the Ministry of Defense. We give them an opportunity while they are still studying to join the Defensity College, what we call it. And while they are studying, they can work 1 or 2 or maybe 3 days for the Ministry of Defense if they are available. And we make them a kind of reserve and have them do this. And so we're looking at more construction, and we're looking actually at the north. We always talk about the Scandinavian model. I don't know if it exists, but we're always referring to Norway and Sweden and Finland, how they do it. And we try to combine it in a Dutch manner and a Dutch way. So for the procedures, like the other colleagues already taught, we also look at how can we speed up the procedure. As I said, our procedure is old-fashioned. And that is because of all the parliamentary processes we are in, and that takes time. So we are looking at raising the mandate, the financial mandate. We are able to buy things, so we don't have to go to Parliament for everything we want to buy. We try to see if we can use our national rules to go quicker into single source procurement. And we have to be less risk averse. In our country, we would like to take every risk away before we buy something. And if you want to speed up, that is not possible. You must accept that there will be a higher risk procuring quicker than you used to have. Looking at the investment in industry, they need to skill up. So a part of our defense budget is now going to industry to make them the scale up possible. And then we're not looking at the big industry. We're looking at the small industry, the startups, the innovative people. How can we give them the money banks and funds don't want to do to make the scale up possible? For innovation, we are looking at ecosystems, as we call them. How can we join these innovative companies with what they are doing, so they know better what we want and we know better what they are able to do. So hopefully we are able to speed up. And for the procurement, we have developed a kind of, well, what we call in the Netherlands, the ladder of simplicity. And the lower you are on the ladder, the more you buy really off the shelf. So what is off the shelf? There's actually nothing on the shelf at this moment, I think, but the lower the ladder, the more off the shelf it is. And the higher the step on the ladder, the more innovation or development is in its meat. And we try to be as low as possible. So when I order the National Armament Director to buy a ship, I can say you need to be on step 1 or step 4 or step 7 or whatever. And he knows exactly what to do. And of course, another example is participating other countries in their procurement. As I said, Germany for the army is very important, but we also look at combining all the European initiatives to buy equipment, and that helps us a lot as well. So, in summary, it hurts. There is no single solution. And we need to look at the long term for this problem. And I hope this gives you a little insight on how we look at the problem. Sammy.
Thank you so much. And for bringing out that point about the requirement for this business to be attractive. It needs to be an attractive offer to the people, to your investors, and also to your partners. Very interesting points. We have just over 45 minutes for questions, ladies and gents. The panelists have very kindly spoken on the condition that it's on the record. I would remind you that your questions are also on the record. If you can just raise your hand should you wish to ask a question. And if you could announce your name and your affiliation. And if you want to direct it towards a particular person, please say so. If it's towards the panel, please say so, and I'll direct it accordingly. Please.
Okay, I'm Young Korean Ambassador Czechia. Thank you very much. You are presenting each European country's view how to increase your defense spending and also procurement. What I understand is that there are certain kind of basic guidelines among NATO members to coordinate where to spend, and but also seemingly according to what I heard from you, it's not exactly that much actually specific or very much imposing. So each government has actually certain ample room to decide where to spend, how to spend. But also what I see is that looking at the map actually, the Nordic countries are facing direct threat from certain country. Also, not just from ground forces, but also there should be huge demand for naval forces. Because, for example, the Arctic Sea was once considered sea of peace, but now things might get different. But building up naval forces means that huge investment, which one country cannot afford. So in this case, if there is certain kind of division of labor or kind of a coordination efforts among NATO members, some country might spend more wisely for certain area where that country has certain kind of specialty. But without that, if every government spends small by small on everything, means that it will be the total amount of spending is big, but not very wisely spent. So is there each government is thinking about that kind of big picture, or just struggling day by day with their urgent need for their defense forces? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think the main answer to how we do this in NATO is the NATO defense planning process, in which member nations are given, based upon the sort of level of ambition defined politically, each nation are given capability targets. And in some, those capability targets should meet NATO's total needs. So that is a very important input to the Norwegian process, as we prioritize to try to accommodate the capability targets that we are presented by NATO. And we also, during this process, we had consultations with the defense planners in Brussels in order to know as much as possible on what to expect, so that our plan sort of matched what we thought would come out of NATO. There is also, with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, there is much more emphasis now on trying to coordinate among the Nordic countries how to meet the capability targets that all of our nations are presented with in the region. So I think that are my main questions, my main answers to your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. I suspect the General will have some good comments on Romania's approach to this as well.
Thank you for the question, Your Excellency. It would be two aspects. So one is planning and one is procuring as such. When planning, we're speaking about NATO defense planning process, as General said, and when speaking about NATO defense planning process, we are speaking about a fair share, which is your contribution for the NATO common defense effort, and the exigencies, the standards, so you know what you have to done there, what you have to buy there. Another aspect, which is the most challenging, I believe, in all the NATO nations, is the national defense process. Because national defense process based, I believe, in all nations on a sincere strategic defense review is asking you the entire capability the nation needs for defending for a certain period of time. In Romania, we went to 2040, by the way. So that's a very challenging planning process. In Romania, we have the endowment process. And now it's about planning like in other NATO nations, because we have common models, and therefore we look like we are treating similarly. We have a permanent plan of 10-year approved by our Supreme Defense Council. We speak about a permanent plan and speak about a living plan, which is renewed each year because it's a living process. And like in all the NATO nations, the endowment process, because it's a complete endowment process in which procuring or acquiring is the last stage, is operational driven, is led basically by the exigencies of the operational forces led by the Chief of Defense in our case. In our law, the Chief of Defense is establishing the priorities, the services are establishing what they want to buy for them, and they are giving you the budget. So they are also providing the operational requirements. You transfer in technical requirements with which you go on the market to buy. That would be about planning. About procuring is more difficult because there we are speaking not only on two exigencies, national and NATO, but we're speaking about the EU-specific law because there is a EU-specific directive regarding the defense acquisitions. So you have to obey that directive and you have to obey your national law, which I believe each EU nation has a national law for defense acquisition coming from that directive. And you have to obey to, and also you have to obey to all the rules your country is establishing, because we are speaking here, and therefore, sir, I use that so much, we are speaking here about public procurement. Many times we have even failing with some companies which figure out that they face another kind of procuring, not a public procuring. So they are coming to negotiate what commercially they could have negotiated with other companies, and we cannot do it because we have to obey to the national laws being public procurement. But even so, besides the national efforts, which indeed, and I totally agree with our Dutch colleague, the fact that the competition is not the most effective, but the most clear and transparent manner of acquiring, even if, sir, that in these days we need more negotiating and direct acquisitions, having the war at our doors, like in case of Romania. But besides the national manner, we also use different common approaches in acquisition in both organizations, NATO and EU. In NATO, we are using the NATO support agency, basically, while in EU, we are going to joint acquisition together with other nations. Sorry for this long answer, but I hope I answered to your question, Excellency.
Thank you. Edward, do you have anything to add?
No, a little bit maybe, yes. Yeah, of course, for the Netherlands as well, NATO is the cornerstone of our safety system, so to speak. And as the General explained, you have the NATO defense planning process, but you also have to do your national defense planning. Actually, Sakur, I think it was last year, said, when we're talking about going to war, we're talking about Article 5. But you also have Article 3, which says you need to be able to defend your own country. And he said Article 3 goes before Article 5. So there's a lot of attention and interest in this national plan in the Netherlands as well. So what do we need for protection of our critical infrastructure or underwater infrastructure at the North Sea? But you also have national requirements. We also have the Dutch Caribbean. I don't think Putin is going to the Dutch Caribbean, maybe for a holiday, but that's it. But you need as well capacities for defending and securing that area. So in the Netherlands, it's always a discussion. Of course, NATO is the cornerstone, but as the General said, you also have EU, and they are asking capacities as well, and you have your national requirements. So it's always discussing what is more important. And then you go not only to a financial planning, but also to a capacity planning. What are you able to procure, and what are you able to buy right now? Because the worst we can have in the Netherlands is that our money vaporizes because we don't spend it. And then it goes back to the Ministry of Finance. I keep doing this, sorry. The money goes back to the Ministry of Finance, and we can't use it anymore. So we need to make plans that are actually able to execute. So it is a balance about what is necessary for NATO, what is necessary for EU, what is necessary for the Netherlands, but also what can we achieve as quick as possible.
Thank you very much. I'm Esther Sabatino. I'm part of the IISS people here. I focus mostly on European security and defense policy, and so I'm really interested in the dynamics also at the EU level, and you referred to that quite substantially. Well, actually, there is also a tension, as we know, between the NATO processes and EU processes, the prevalence of the NATO one over the EU ones. But then my question is, so the European Union has been taking on a lot of activities, and is doing several activities, particularly in the defense industrial sector. And it is now going towards doing more on joint procurement, as written in the strategy, and as is going to be delineated, particularly in the defense industrial program. But I have the impression that NDPP is going to still prevail, of course, at the national level when it comes to defining ways to do procurement. My question is, if you had a white paper in front of you and you could advise on how the EU system could better serve how to do procurement, joint procurement, prioritization, and so on and so forth, what would you do? What would be your 3 main priorities, for example?
Thank you so much, and for taking it to the EU, which I think we all recognise is becoming more active, more muscular, and stretching its wings geographically further. Eamon, can I ask you to perhaps lead off on that one?
Yeah. I think it's got to do with delivery. So as a concept, joint procurement is good, it makes sense. We all have lots of challenges about our own individual capability to do procurement competition or write a technical spec and so on and so forth. And we're trying to balance putting resources into that area whilst also spending the money that we get from our Ministry of Finance and making sure that gets done. So it is actually establishing those joint procurement frameworks and countries taking the lead, one country taking the lead in a specific area where other countries can go in behind that and utilise that as a mechanism to deliver the capability that they require. And there's quite a lot of work that's going through at an EU level to facilitate that, particularly the European Defence Agency and so on. But I think that's really important, particularly for a country like Ireland, which has a small planning and capability unit. We still, if we didn't have that kind of facility, we'd have to go through the whole process ourselves. So it'd be very, very difficult for us to do and manage all the capabilities at the one time. So I think joint procurement is really important. I think having common standards, maybe others here would maybe build on that common standards in terms of what we're procuring to ensure that interoperability and that we're all operating on the same sort of level. I think that would have a very significant impact as well in terms of our ability to, you described the ladder of simplicity. I think it would sort out quite a lot of the ladder of simplicity there, as well as bringing a bit more certainty for industry in terms of what are the standards that they have to work to. So there'd be two ideas potentially in that blank piece of paper that you're talking about. Maybe colleagues might have other ideas as well.
Thank you. Henning Andre, for Norway, we can leap over you and go directly to Romania, if we may. General.
Okay. Thank you, what we have done. I do not know if the representative, sorry. I do not know if the representative of DG Defis is here. However, I wanted to thank him or her for, because I wrote in the list that it was there for the occurrence of the DG Defis in the last period of time. I'm speaking of the directorate in EU, which is dealing with this directive. I will give you just two examples which we would want to see there and we have proposed. One is what's about negotiation without publication, or in other words, direct acquisitions. A case to be accepted is the situation of urgency when you have the war at the border, like in case of Romania. It's one example. Another example could be why not accept it? A joint acquisition with two EU states, not necessarily minimum three. Because you have to understand, and I thank to my Dutch colleague because he underlined, that we are in a period in which all the European states, for sure, have heavy acquisitions in defense. All of us are doing the same. So we are facing, and speaking about ecosystem of acquisition, two different entities. One is our beneficiary, in fact, the operational forces, which will accuse us all the time that we are not acquiring enough and not within an enough speed. And second is the companies. And there are a lot of rules between, and those rules are referring of how to do the acquisition. As I said, the competition is the most correct one, because the acquisition provides transparency and correctitude, but is not the most efficient and not for sure the most rapid one, and you need sometimes. I do not speak about the situations in which you have to face a unique equipment and you have to buy according to the manner in which it is sold. Like, I salute our friends from Lockheed Martin here. We'll sign in a few weeks our letter of acceptance for $6.5 billion for 32 F-35. I buy F-35 because it is sold by G2G, so I have to go there. Otherwise, we speak about the competition is correct, but we need also to move faster in these times, because you said that there was no such dimension of the acquisition since 30 years. In Romania, it wasn't such a dimension since at the beginning of the Second World War. Because in the communist time, indeed, it was an acquisition, a solid acquisition from the Romanian defense industry, but was according to the rules of the communist state. It was based on state orders. while here we are speaking about open market in this area. So, but there are room for improvement, as I said, and we are very glad that DigiDef is opened for that, and even now there is a discussion regarding the improvement of this directive. Thank you for the question.
So I'll apologise to our Norwegian friends, because probably a perspective from Norway being in the European Economic Area is directly relevant to this, so please.
Well, we're not a member of the EU, so I won't make any strong voices about EU business, but we do take part in the defense cooperation with the EU. We are part of the EDF. I have meetings with the capability director in the EU, and we are part of the PESCO military mobility program, and so on. So the defense relationship with the EU is quite important to us. And one point about what Europe could do and perhaps should do is on the issue of standardization. NATO has done that for many years. One can discuss how successful it has been, but it's far better than nothing. And I think also the experience from the war in Ukraine shows the immense challenges that flows from the diversity of military equipment. So standardization and to a certain degree consolidation in order to achieve more effective joint procurement, I think that's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Please.
Good evening. Emanuele Serafini, Lockheed Martin. I have a question for General Franzen, who actually you introduced before, and it's about Nordic cooperation. I mean, the Nordics are in a unique position now, and this willingness to cooperate since Finland and Sweden joined NATO is something that we are hearing more and more and more. Can you really expand on what does it mean? I mean, we're talking about capability sharing, joint sustainment, training, or even joint procurement. And also what role Nordefco will eventually play. It's not an organization, it's a, I don't know, I would call it a platform. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Nordic defense cooperation has a long tradition. It's something we have done for many decades, but it has been featured by the fact that Sweden and Finland have not been made member of NATO. With Swedish and Finnish membership, there is no more an issue to question the commitment. We are now, it really changes the geography, the geostrategic circumstances in the region. And we have a capability directors meeting twice a year in Nordefco, and that has really changed with Sweden and Finland becoming members, because now the NATO defense planning process is the framework for this kind of meetings and for the dialogue. So we try to coordinate amongst ourselves how we together can come up with defense plans that respond to the NATO defense planning requirements. So like you said, it's not an organization, it's more of a framework. And I think that framework will intensify in the coming years. But we also realize that this is a huge shift for especially Sweden and Finland, and also for Norway and Denmark and Iceland, you know, how to coordinate our defense plans and our defense, long-term defense planning. I think integration will be one of the paths forward. Simultaneously, we have different geographic orientation. Norway focuses to the north and the west. Denmark to the west, maritime perspectives. Finland has a 1,200-kilometer land border with Russia. Naturally focuses more on the land side. And Sweden to the Baltic. So we have to sort of discuss amongst ourselves how we can integrate and support each other's defense efforts, realizing also that we have different orientation and different priorities. But the Nordic countries as a whole, there is a great potential for more cooperation. And the Nordic chods have developed together a defense concept within the framework of the NATO families of plans, and that will be useful in guiding us in the years to come on how to coordinate and cooperate in defense planning.
Thank you. Lucie Béraud-Sudreau from the European Defence Agency. Thank you for the great interventions. There's a lot of discussion about ramping up industrial production capacity, but from what I'm hearing, is also a need for ramping up procurement capacity given the influx of budgets in Europe. So I think that was an interesting thread across your speaking points. My question is, looking at European cooperation, would you say, I understand the need now for faster procurement, would you say that joint procurement is actually slowing you down, or is it rather, or do you see it as a benefit? How do you see the balance between the need for cooperation and the need for speed? Thank you.
Thank you. Edward, you want to take on first?
Yeah, that's an easy answer. It is slowing down, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to do it. And maybe I can give an example of one of our helicopters we bought many years ago, the NH90. We bought it with we bought a non-existing helicopter with a group of countries by a group of industry. And then you have the European problem twice, or in quadranten, as we say in the Netherlands. And that is not to hash on the NH90 because it's a perfect helicopter, but it is an example of how joint procurement can slow you down. But I think it's still important to do joint procurement. As I said, we look for the Army, specifically to Germany, what they do. We look for the Navy to Belgium, what they do and what we can do together. And like the Nordics, we have a kind of cooperation between Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. So we also look at standardization, that kind of things. But joint procurement is always interesting because you can combine requirements and you have a better question to the industry. And that it enlarges the drive to standardization and compatibility. So I think, yes, it is slowing down, but you need to do it. So you actually need to look at what equipment do you want to be procured with other countries and what not. And sometimes you decide we do it our own, and that's what I said. We also look at single source procurement only from the Netherlands. Sometimes you say, no, it's more interesting to do it together with another country or a group of countries. So again, it's a balance. There's no yes or no.
Eamon, can I maybe come to you to give a view from somebody with perhaps less historical baggage?
Oh, I fully agree. It's one of the tools that is there, and we have to be open to utilise all of the mechanisms to procure. And it is that assessment of these are all the capabilities that you require. Which of those mechanisms best suits that capability? And there may be, other strategic reasons as well to go down the joint procurement route. So it's not an either or. It's all of the above. But I think the critical thing is choosing the right projects or capabilities that you go down that joint procurement route. And I suspect as well, when countries have experience through a joint procurement process, with those countries, you learn an awful lot from that process, and it can be applied to other joint procurements. So although it may need to ramp up, I see it as part of the suite of solutions that we're going to have to apply to meet all the capabilities demands into the future.
I think joint procurement can slow you down. It can take time to arrive at common design of a submarine, but once you're there, it has the potential for increased effectiveness during decades of the lifetime of the piece of equipment you buy. Secondly, it can also speed up the process. For instance, when in our long-term plan, there is the government proposal which Parliament endorsed to buy new frigates. Those frigates are to be ASW capable of operating in the Arctic. They should come from an existing production line. We will acquire it together with a close ally, and it should be, the procurement should start by the end of this decade. Government will, based on that, make a decision. At least the ambition is to make a decision next year. That if we were able to do that, that will be much faster than we did it when we did it on the national basis, producing our national frigates, which is a lesson learned that is a capability too advanced for a small nation to develop on its own. So I think if you sort of create the political ramification for a procurement, it can actually also speed up the process. Thank you.
Allow me to be more specific. The fastest procurement is single source procurement, that is clear. The second, in my opinion, is the joint procurement according to the EDIRPA rule and the joint procurement to the NSPA. If I will make an acquisition of 2 billion of something, it will be faster through EDIRPA or through NSPA than by having a competition. With all the risks, the periods, the companies needing more time for making their offer and so on. But also I have to say that according to the new joint procurement opened through EDIRPA by the European Union, it depends on the leading nation. Because the leading nation has to have the homework made. In the same time, you will not have a huge yes at home, because those acquisitions are not taken into account your national defense industry. Because you are acquiring from a single source as a producer. So there are still stages in the evolution of the common procurement in EU, but the EDIRPA helps a lot in speeding the process comparing to competition, by the way. But we are speaking about equipment which obviously have to be there, because after actually the joint procurement has another minus. It could exclude the important competitors. And do not forget what I said, that our main purpose, it doesn't depend on the declaration, but in fact our main purpose, therefore we are functioning, is to acquire the best equipment for a certain mission our forces need. Thank you.
If I may ask a question, in terms of procuring for national requirements, much of the discussion has been about traditional capabilities, your ships, your tanks, your artillery, your aircraft, etc. Can you maybe expand on how you factor in those capabilities that are required for the constant competition that everybody is in, which is short of war, cyber, information, influence, and potentially even space in terms of a competitive environment. How can you help kind of bring that to life? Because these are the things that are often not seen, but often most engaged in your planning. Can I go to you first?
Yeah, like I mentioned in the introduction, Western countries, most countries today rely heavily on space and cyber-based capabilities. So do our societies as well as our military capabilities. So in the long-term plan, we sort of put that in the forefront to make sure that it wasn't forgotten. So we have resourced those two domains quite heavily, realizing that we have to put more resources into protecting those domains than we have so far. In Norway, we have a space industry, small satellites, and the ground network as well. That has been developed on a commercial basis by civilian companies, but it does represent a military capability as well, dual use. But with the increased significance of space and cyber in the military domain, we have to put more resources than I think we foresee at the moment into protecting those capabilities in the year to come. So we have tried to accommodate that in the plan by setting aside significant resources to meet the requirements of the future. Whether it's enough or not, I'm not convinced, but at least I think we have sort of raised the issue that it doesn't really help to have advanced fighter aircraft, modern frigates, and so on, if you are not able to communicate, navigate in the Arctic.
Thank you. And perhaps, Eamon, to you, because obviously in your country there is a very well-developed civil sector and national requirements competing for people, etc. Yeah, how does that play out?
Well, I talked earlier about our defence policy review, and that highlighted the cyber risks in the cyber domain, and you go through exactly the same process in terms of the planning for that and the building of that capability over time. I suspect the biggest issue we have with respect to development of the cyber capability is the development of the people. Even when you do development, retaining those people with those skills, given how marketable those skills are. So I suspect that the challenge on that side of things from a cyber perspective isn't so much the development of the capability and the focus on the protection of those critical assets. It's how do we maintain the capability in our people in their cyberspace. I suspect it might utilise a lot more engagement with industry, particularly the use of reserves and so on, and getting that expertise maybe through that mechanism. But that's what I see as the biggest challenge there. And I don't know if we have the answer to it as of yet, but it's certainly an area of focus, and it'll probably be an area of focus for the next number of years to build up that capability in our people. In that cyber domain. And again, I don't know if colleagues are in the same boat, but I suspect they are.
I think everything we've said and discussed counts for space as well. We have a close cooperation with Norway in the space program. So that's exactly the same. For cyber, it's different, I think. I think cyber in our country is very close to intelligence. Not cyber defense, but cyber offense is very close to intelligence. So I think for that reason we don't do that much cooperation on this subject. Of course, we work together, we practice together. We have this competition who can hack any company as first or the best. But cooperation in terms of procedures and that kind of thing, I think it's still a very closed area, in my opinion, but I'm not so well known about this cyber. So for space, no problem at all. Cyber is different. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Speaking about space and cyber, for a country like Romania, and there is clear in planning, and they spoke about planning and strategy, it should be interagency strategy, because it's a common interest, both space and cyber for more agencies. I am speaking about, when I speak about space, I speak about communication, satellite, and so on. For procurement, acquiring satellites, it's a nightmare. Do you know why? Because no rule is applying there. Because there are more producers. I can say just now US, Britain, France, Finland, South Korea. And when you are making an acquisition, you are making an acquisition based on a rule. There is a competition, so commercial companies are coming, they're offering, they're qualifying, after that they're giving the offer. But while about satellite, you do not know which rule you will approach, because for each nation you have to talk to commercial company which is producing in the same time with the state space organization, with the military Ministry of Defense, which has its role in launching the satellite. On the other hand, you are acquiring things like insurance to the launching, which is quite challenging in terms of money and in terms of delivery. So practically, there is a huge challenge in procurement in the space area. This is my conclusion, and as a practitioner in that area.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Sami, for asking that question. I'm the head of cyber at IISS, and I was sitting here thinking, ooh, is cyber relevant here? But thanks for asking. And my name's Julia. So the question I wanted to ask was around, I guess, the technologies that are like currently under development, particularly, I guess, in like smaller startups. A lot of the kind of points that you've made about procurement, it doesn't seem to be like startup friendly. And I think I wanted to ask you all of your opinion of the NATO Diana program. Like, how much do you think that this is going to enhance capabilities for the alliance? How much do you actually like, I don't know, incorporating this into your like multi-year planning as something to incorporate? Yeah. Anyone, really?
I'm coordinating the R&D in the Romanian Armed Forces, and we are doing R&D using our national sectorial plan, the Ministry of Defense sectorial plan, our national R&D plan, because we have an R&D ministry. We are using, after that, the EU EDF, which is quite efficient, and also Diana. We are very pleased with the multinational programs, either speaking about EDF or Diana. We are not so pleased with our efforts, and here, when we are speaking about own efforts in RRD, I'm speaking about retainment of the personnel. I have in my subordination an R&D agency, and I remained without specialists in artificial intelligence, because we cannot compete with the commercial companies which are coming and saying, how much should I pay to the state in order to make you free? And speaking in terms of salary, there's no comparison. So, but Diana and EDF is very important because of what you mentioned at the beginning. They not only are using our startups, but they made us to see how huge potential in R&D we have. In Romania, I will give you an example. I discovered a lot of companies which are working with other armed forces within NATO, not with the Romanian armed forces. Because frankly, we're not competing with those money put on the table. But however, we discovered very important potential in our country. And I believe the best potential is in the startups. Do you know why? Because there are people which are not afraid of the future. while in the biggest companies the accent went or go in other direction. I remember that I participated in 2019 in NATO Industry Forum in Washington, and there were representatives of startups which spoke about the development in new areas, while the biggest companies were speaking about developments in their cyber infrastructure, in provision of the security, of cyber security. So the openness stay in now I have an experience in relationship with them, the openness stay in relationship with these startups. If you manage to have a good relationship with startup and the appropriate teams for R&D, you'll have amazing results, which could be very beneficial for the armed forces, nationally and through Diana or EDF multinationally. Regarding EDF, we are very pleased with the participation of Romanian companies in European Defence Fund. We are not very pleased with the money they are bringing to themselves there, but they have to work harder. Thank you.
Of all the things I wasn't aware of that I was going to do, and I joined the army in 1987, was taking part in setting up the Diana and also the NATO Innovation Fund. It was a completely new world to me. I think it's still early days. We have great expectations. I think that kind of pooling of financial resources has great potential. We certainly have high expectations for this. I think it's the right mechanism, but it's still early days. So we have to be patient and impatient at the same time as we move ahead. But we want results coming out of that. And I think it's necessary to sort of bridge the gap between the traditional military procurement processes and the way these new startups and that part of the industry operates. Thank you.
We have a similar structure in Ireland in terms of other countries. We have a research, technology and innovation unit which looks at the potential application of technologies to the capability requirements that we have for the future. And you know, that's part of that longer term planning and developing of the ecosystem that we have to put in place, because the solutions for of the future haven't really been worked out fully yet. So you have to instigate that thinking within the system. And also, it's not just about the startups; it's also about the integrating with the third level universities as well, and getting that dynamic between the two. So we certainly see lots of benefits for greater utilization of technology and supporting those dual use type companies to apply their thinking to our needs as well.
Let me start, Julie, with thank you for this question on behalf of all the startups, because they deserve the same treatment as the big companies and the big R&D institutions. So yes, Diana is very important for us as well. It's a way, as said before, to be more involved with young people, young companies and their innovation. And we like to hook up because it's much easier to talk with them about what you need, what they can, and how we can bring that together. It's easier than the big companies. So I think it's very important. And we have, as I said in my introduction, we have reserved €1 billion for specially cooperation with this young startup. So it will not be via Diana, but we join Diana as much as possible. But we have more initiatives for the startups, especially for the cyber area, which is growing and getting more and more important. So yeah, I think we are on the same seat of music. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I will bring it to a close. Gentlemen, yeah, I think everybody understands how vital the work is that you do. You've explained exceptionally well how broad your portfolios are and therefore how busy you are. So we're incredibly thankful for you giving up not just your time, but all of your thoughts in such an open and comprehensive way. We have a reception at 1900. You have more than earned your refreshments there, and I'm sure many people will want to pick your brains outside of this session. But ladies and gents, if you can join me in thanking our panel.